Um, in just a moment. Actually, I forgot to say Happy Mother's Day earlier today. So happy Mother's Day to all you moms and important ladies in people's lives, grandmas, aunts. Maybe you're just a lady that mentors other people. Thank you so much for those investments into other people's lives. As a part of that, one of the things we have for you today to celebrate motherhood and just the investment of women in other people's lives is we've just have some stickers for you. They're there at the back. These were actually made by Olivia, and so she spent a long time making these. They're wonderful. I would encourage you to ladies to pick one up. Fellas, if you want to pick one up for a lady that you know, please feel free to do that. There's several different kinds back there, some meaningful, some humorous, and just worth the time. Okay, so this morning, we actually have a guest speaker with us, and where's the mic that you had for? Oh, you gave it to her, okay. And that our own Ellen Knutson is going to come, and she's going to share with you today. So yeah, come on. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, thank you. I was just saying to Blair, I always get a bit nervous, a lot nervous when I am asked to speak or something, so bear with me. A lot of you know me, but over the last few years, there's a lot of new faces here at church as well, so I'll introduce myself a little bit. My husband John and I have been at CLF for about 13 years. We moved here in 2012 when John was invited to be the associate pastor. John was pastor here till 2022 when we felt like God was calling him out of ministry for a little bit of time. To be determined. We'll see what happens. God, you never know. We have 3 kids. Evelyn is 8, Lewis is 6, and Elise is 3. And like Blair said, Happy Mother's Day. This is a day to celebrate. It's a day that holds probably a lot of emotions for lots of people. And so I just want to say to all you lovely ladies out there, Happy Mother's Day. When Blair asked me to talk, I thought a lot about what I would share. How do you sum up motherhood and faith in a quick Sunday message? And the truth is you can't. So I picked one of the pieces. I could stand here and tell you so many examples of how I've learned surrender, humility, and I could tell you numerous stories of God's faithfulness and ways and things that He has taught me. But the story I chose to share today is from Psalm 121. That's kind of what I'll be talking about. Many of you probably know this psalm as well. I'll put it up right here. You will learn what the funny little pictures on this card mean in a little bit. I can do a lot of things, but I cannot draw. But anyways, you'll learn a little bit more about what that means in a bit. So, like I said, Evelyn is 8. We welcomed her into the world in October 2016. We fell in love immediately and then learned that human beings can survive on very little sleep. Lewis joined our family in 2019, and with him we learned that love increases instead of splitting when you add more people to your family. We also learned that spitty babies produce so much laundry, and we did cloth diapers, so yeah, he was a spitter. Elise came along in 2021, and if you've met Elise, you will know that it's true when we say we learned that God can fit a lot of personality into a tiny little body. Throughout these beautiful, chaotic, and sleepless years, like I said, I could share numerous stories of God's faithfulness. I could also tell you I still have no idea what I'm doing. But where I want to jump to is the summer and spring of 2022. And I didn't think this was going to feel as vulnerable as it is when I was writing it down, and then I was practicing. So again, just bear with me a little bit. But I had 3 beautiful, healthy kids. Life was great. And I was really struggling. On the outside, everything was fine. The kids were growing. They were healthy. We were kind of sleeping. No one was overly fussy. We could go on adventures. We were spending lots of time doing things I loved. But I was barely holding it together. I didn't feel like myself. Everything felt incredibly difficult. I was angry all of the time and on the verge of tears all the time. I used to feel like I had so much patience, but that at the time that felt completely inaccessible to me. I counted down hours, minutes, and seconds to bedtime, and then I spent my evenings and nights dreading what the night was going to hold. It felt like too much work to connect with friends or people to support me, and I was really tired of trying to pretend that everything was okay. Thankfully, I had a very attentive husband and some very persistent friends, one of whom suggested maybe it would be a good idea to talk to my doctor about how I was feeling. I said, you know what, it's not a big deal. I'm just tired. I have 3 kids, that's a lot. Life is always hard for people sometimes, and every mother experiences a hard season. Though all of these things were and are true, so it turns out was the fact that I was really struggling with postpartum depression. After receiving a diagnosis with my doctor and starting with appropriate supports, I think I slept for like 2 or 3 days. My parents took our big kids, and Elise, who was just 4 months old at the time, spent a lot of time with Daddy. John would wake me up periodically throughout the day when she would need feeding and through the night, but I was just exhausted and empty. Slowly, with time, lots of rest, medication, and beginning to learn what it meant to be vulnerable enough to allow loved ones to offer support, I began to put myself back together. And I had to learn to let a lot of things go. I had to acknowledge my limits and admit my season and my realities. I had to learn to say no and accept help. I had to learn to let people love me when I didn't feel strong. And I learned to lean into God in a way that I had not done so before. It was this season of life, beyond any that I had experienced before, that I learned to trust Him to be my daily strength, my step-by-step provision. Previous pieces of my motherhood journey, as I've shared with the church before, had been really challenging. John and I struggled for several years to get pregnant, and then we lost a baby to miscarriage. But I had never felt the depletion and emptiness as I had in this season. It was such a dark and kind of numb time, and if any of you have been there, you know what I'm talking about. This was the first time I felt like I had just nothing to contribute, nothing to put forward. Raising 3 kids, some days before I got out of bed, I felt overwhelmed, or the energy that I had, felt like the tank of energy I had for the day had been completely drained before anybody had had breakfast. Sometimes the depression, or the anger and sadness I felt were so dark, I just had to actively call out to God to help me put one foot in front of the other. It was so difficult to move my eyes off of my circumstances and remember His character. I knew He was faithful, I knew He was good, and I knew He was near, but I couldn't get my eyes up. I was certainly not winning Best Mom or Creative Mom, Fun Mom, absolutely not Chill Mom awards in this season of life, but I began to learn different ways of His provision for me. A child's hug when they would find me crying. Again, like I said, letting go of expectations, unrealistic, whether set by myself or other people. I began to admit the reality of my season, that I couldn't do everything. I learned the incredible support of friends and how meaningful it is when you are vulnerable and you allow someone to step in and you get to feel the gift, like when you're the person reaching out and lifting someone up. I got to be carried for a while. And I learned to receive, and Psalm 121 really began to transform my thinking. And I tell you my story not to glorify my hardship, because we all walk through incredibly challenging seasons of life. Many of us are grieving alongside a loved family after the last couple weeks receiving some news. Life can be really hard. But today I share this story to just declare God's incredible faithfulness throughout our trials and experiences. So this is Psalm 121, and I'm going to get Mariah to play a video. I know I told her it would be at a different spot, but I'm going to do it here instead. Evelyn gave me permission to share this with you.
Where does my help come from? The Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not slumber or sleep, and He will not let our foot slip. He who watches over you will not the maker.
He's the
Shed of your right hand. He who
the sun,
will not harm you by day,
nor the
moon by day or
By
night.
the Lord will
Watch, keep over you
keep you from
all harm
the Lord watches
over you
now
and forever love.
forevermore. Psalm 121.
So Evelyn is 3.5 in that video, and that was together worked to memorize that psalm in the early days of the pandemic when we were stuck at home a lot. And those are the pictures. John thought Evelyn had drawn them, but no, it was me. So I was drawing them for a 3-year-old. Anyways, so that is that's Psalm 121, and Psalm 121 is. Oh, is it gonna work? Can you go to the what are the Psalms? There we go. So Psalm 121 is from a set of Psalms referred to as the Psalms of Ascent. There's 15, Psalm 120 to 134. And these were psalms and songs spoken as the Jews would trek from their homes to Jerusalem throughout the year to celebrate the feasts and to worship God. The Jews were required to make this journey several times per year. I think it kind of depended whether you were a man, woman, different things like that, but you'd have to trek, again, from wherever you were living to Jerusalem. These times of worships were intended for the Jews to make sacrifices for their sins, to think of his work through the past, to renew their commitment to him, and to respond to his work with thanksgiving, praise, obedience, and sacrifice. And throughout Scripture, these psalms are quoted and referenced, which I think is so beautiful that, and we still quote them today, and I just love that. I read this quote that says, "The Psalms, like Psalms of Ascent, are helpful for our journey through life because they're a collection of poems, prayers, and hymns that help us understand who God is in the midst of our emotions." So, and kind of today, I want to relate this. I think about this psalm as if we're trekking, like in our daily life. They were trekking from wherever they lived to Jerusalem, and we're trekking from day by day as we wait to go to heaven. As we move through the Psalms, pay attention to a few things. The reminders of who God is, his character and his nature expressed by the psalmist. The number of times you hear the words that suggest protection, watching, and keeping, as well as the psalmist's acknowledgement of the realities in the context of Scripture. So, I'm just going to scroll down here. It's easy in life, like I said, we can easily set our gaze on our trials, or even not trials, but just the busyness and the kind of, not monotony, but sometimes monotony of day by day. It's easy to focus on what could happen or the pain that we experience. And as we talked this morning, I want you to think about the Jews trekking, again, through the wilderness. So if we use Galilee as an example, Galilee to Jerusalem was about 120 kilometers. If we think of something here, that's like traveling from Campbell River to Qualicum on foot, sometimes with your kids. And if people could walk an average of like 20 to 30 kilometers a day, that journey would have taken 4 to 8 days on foot. There were also not as many coffee shops along the way or restaurants and hotels, so they would have had to carry all of their stuff with them. So this is not a small journey. It's not an easy task. And I think that when the psalmist starts to ask us these questions, the reason that they're asking, that first verse is phrased as a question. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? And the answer is, he gives this answer, and he even asks the question, because things feel hard, because they really are. And life throws a lot our way. But the psalmist reminds us to lift our eyes up to the hills, to the one who created us, who created heaven and earth. I did this study of the Psalms of Ascent with Beth Moore before, and I don't know if any of you know her. She's got this amazing Southern accent, and she was talking about this, and please forgive me for this, but she says, I've moved my mind up. And that little phrase, when she talks about this, has stuck in my head all of the time, just like the psalmist challenging us to lift our eyes up to Jesus. So I also want to say that part of the reason we're called to look up is because if I show you this picture and we look at our circumstances, like I said, whether it's just day by day or there's really hard stuff going on, we can often forget about the bigger picture that God has before us. That's the same view. I've just chosen to look up. I've chosen to shift my gaze to the Creator, to call to mind His character, His presence, and to rest in Him. Lewis and I were sitting on the patio this morning chatting, listening to the birds and watching our chickens peck around, and he says, Mama, just listen. Look at the trees and just listen. And I thought, like, oh man, even in the goodness, God calls us to lift our mind to Him and just delight in who He says He is. And I really learned in my season of depression that help is not found in front of us. For months before receiving the diagnosis and getting help, I had tried so many things to be my own source of help. But it's not found in our wisdom, our endurance, or creativity. It's not found in how well your house is organized or the systems that you create for kids to put the shoes away. It's not found in bedtime schedules or anything like that. It's found in Him. And He's so much greater than we can comprehend. Oh, I forgot to show this one too. John always sends me pictures when he's hunting. And again, if we move our mind up, the view is just so much greater. Moving into verse 3, like I said, and again, I'm just going to cry. So many experiences in life feel like our feet are just pulled out completely from underneath of us. And there's real grief found there. When John and I experienced a miscarriage after trying to conceive for several years, I felt like the rug had been completely pulled out from under me. I was heartbroken and angry, and maybe you felt similarly in any number of circumstances. But the psalmist reminds us that God will not let our feet slip. He who watches over you never slumbers. Indeed, He who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. And if you think of these people on these journeys, on this trek to Jerusalem, it was multiple days, so they had to take turns. They had to stop and sleep at some point. And if you think of, again, from here to Qualicum, there's mountains, there's woods. These guys were in deserts, but there were likely also robbers in the hills, animals waiting for them. And I'm sure that the guards watching nodded off on occasion, or at the very least had to shift and take turns. But God never does that for us. If you're a parent and you have tucked little people in, maybe like ours, they want you to sit with them until they fall asleep. And they'll probably say something like, I just feel so much safer when you're here. I can close my eyes when I know you're watching me. Isn't that how we feel when we think of God watching over us? He's never surprised or caught off guard by anything on the journey. He's always present. And thinking further on this journey, if we think about the conditions that they were trekking in, like I said, there would be things coming. But think of just if you're just going to Jerusalem for Passover in the spring. Again, we'll relate it to here, but so many kinds of weather could come. We could have rain, sun, hail, frost, and these guys were trekking through the desert, and the psalmist reminds them of the nearness and protection of God. He says, the Lord is your keeper. The Lord is the shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. And throughout Scripture, the term of shade or shadow was considered a symbol of protection. There's a couple verses here, Psalm 91:1. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I say of the Lord, He's my refuge and fortress, my God in whom I trust. Psalm 57:1, have mercy on me, O God, have mercy. I look to you for protection. I will hide beneath the shadow of your wings until danger passes by. Isaiah 32:2, each one will be like a shelter from the wind and a refuge from the storm, like streams in the water in the desert and the shadow of a rock in a thirsty land. Shade was important. And in the psalm here, he says, the shade at your right hand. One of the times I was studying through this psalm, the author of the study said Imagine the sun casting shade, imagine the sun shining on your hand and picture where the shade would fall. No matter how far you would move your hand, that shade would be close to you. And the psalmist just reminds us, like, God is so near to us all the time. And also in this verse here, in verse 6, the psalmist reminds us that God is with them even through the certainty of hardship. Sun and moon in the desert was no small thing. And the sun will not harm you by day and the moon by night. There's just this continuous passage. God never leaves us alone. I also found this little piece that I hadn't known before. But it says, in ancient cultures, there were superstitions regarding the moon's influence, such as causing lunacy. By stating that neither the sun nor the moon would harm them, the psalmist refutes these fears, emphasizing that God's protection extends beyond even physical dangers to include spiritual and mental well-being. And that means so much because we know that hardships are so much more than physical as well, and God's with us through all of it. As we enter into the last couple verses from the psalm, I just want to remind that all of us experience hardship of many kinds amidst so many joys in life. And chances are, before we come together again next week, there's going to be things that happen that cause sadness and pain. That's the broken world that we live in. But the psalmist acknowledges, again, just the promise of God's real protection. And we sang it this morning in the beautiful songs, that our story doesn't end on this side of things either. We're trekking all the way to heaven. And when he talks about his keeping and his watching our life, it's not just about the circumstances here, because he's got the end planned out. And he promises that his sustaining is his salvation for us, which is such a gift. So I'm gonna, and this is like through my whole experience, I just began to learn bit by bit that just to lift up my eyes. And I titled the message that today, just lift up your eyes. Because over and over in the good things, when you're wondering, how do I mean, again, I could list any number of things, but if your kid is sick, or if you're trying to figure out, plans for school, or any number of things, God is there, and he's willing to meet you and speak to you if you just lift up your eyes. So I'm going to show you the psalm one more time, and maybe we could read it together this morning. I'll read verse 1, and then you can join me in verse 2. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is the shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. I'm just going to show you one more time. I said in the beginning to pay attention to the number of references. And I'm a visual person, though I cannot draw, but I like to see a visual. So here I've highlighted kind of all of the references to his watchfulness, his keeping. And then in the next slide, I've highlighted how the psalmist shares God's character and acknowledges God's nature in the midst of the realities of what they were facing at the time. And if you see that, the whole psalm is kind of highlighted. It's lit up in color because the psalmist is trying to drill that home, like your help comes from the Lord, and he's backing it up with evidence for you. And to me, that's beautiful, that the promise is not the absence of suffering, but the promise of his real protection. So as you leave today and go out into the week, no matter what you're walking through, if you feel overwhelmed, ill-equipped, exhausted, mediocre, stuck, or just plain weary, lift up your gaze to find your help. To the maker of heaven and earth, the one who watches over you, the one who is so near to you, who promises to keep you and to bring you to the glory of his presence. Lift up your eyes.